There you all are. There you all are. I didn't realize it was on. There you go. There you go. Wonderful. Good morning, David. Good morning. Good morning, Rickster Swigster. Hope you're doing well. Mudcast IRL. GM, indeed. 911 subs, and we got a good Bitcoin graffiti joke right in time. Call the police for the 911 subs, indeed. Indeed. Bon matin, j'ai regardé l'épopée québécoise en Amérique, très fascinant à quel point les Québécois l'ont dur. Hey, wow, where do I start? I sometimes can't even think about how hard it was in Quebec to go through. I mean, many times when I lived in Quebec City, just with the extreme temperatures, wondered how it was even possible that people could have lived there in the winter. It's a wild, very harsh climate, very harsh climate. Appelle la police. Good morning. Sun's up. Oh, good. Thank you, P-Man Van. I still cannot confirm a sunrise, so I'll have to trust you. We cannot verify this morning. Tu viens d'où? Where do you come from, Bitcoin Graffiti? Planet Earth. It's about right. It's about right. Good morning, friends. Good morning, Joe. Morning, you crazy plebs. Indeed, you were all very crazy. Toi, Sats Montréal. Yeah, we got a lot of, I like the, Repentigny, Nadia, that's amazing. I love the nice proportion of Montrealers we have here. Maybe one morning I'll wear some Montreal Expos clothes. I'm a big fan of the old B logo. All right, but you're not here to hear about my wardrobe choices. You're here to hear the fakest news I could find. What's the fakest news out there? Well, we got one here from, I'm not sure the source, but we're talking about a school district in Washington State. So Washington's Olympia School District is going to axe music classes because they push white supremacy. Very interesting. I didn't know that. I was unaware. But this one takes the cake. It's not exactly a... Oh, no, hold on. Let me go to the other one. I'll do the... Let me see which one I'm going to do. I got a couple. Yeah, we'll go to the... It's not exactly fake news, but it's great. It's great. So it's a bit about the community notes function. So again, yesterday, Elon Musk talking about community notes, and I've mentioned it many times. All we need is the context added regularly to most questions. Oh, what am I even doing? Hold on. I don't want to leave you hanging with the coffee, right? I don't want to leave you hanging with the coffee. I can't verify the sun, but I can verify Bitcoin. We're doing great. We're doing great, right? All that's left for us to do is talk about all this fake news and have a coffee and talk about what's new. Can't forget that coffee. Can't forget that coffee. Got a hot one here. So, it turns out that, so Elon mentioned the community notes yesterday in one of his tweets. And one of the funniest instances of community notes that I've ever seen has just manifested on Twitter. And I got to read it to you. And it happened twice in 24 hours. So the head of the teachers union in the United States, Randy Weingarten, has posted a series of tweets, and she has them linked to her pinned to her bio on her Twitter profile. And each of them has been fact checked. Each of them has had context added from the community notes system, and she's left them pinned. So it's pretty cool. But here's what she says. Here's her tweet. Right-wing press and Republicans in Congress want you to think that I tried to keep schools closed. Start in April 2020, and I fought to reopen schools. Here's what I actually said. And she tries to do one of these video montages, right? But it says nothing about what she's saying. So the community notes here jumps in and says Weingarten did the opposite, July 2020. And it starts citing all the instances of her approving and supporting all of the teachers' strikes and teachers' security about being exposed to the virus and why the teachers needed to be protected from the children. And no, that's her job, right? I'm not faulting her for doing her job. We're talking about the community notes function here and lying, right? And going straight up and lying, not a good look, right? So it did it. But the LOL part of it is that she got caught twice and kept the tweet pinned. Imagine keeping a pinned tweet that's been fact checked. Hilarious. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the whole the whole concept of these community notes and just adding context and just hearing the other side of the story can have a lot to do and have a huge effect on us getting over some of this trouble that we have about not being able to talk about anything and tons of anxiety and tons of conflict and strife. This is an amazing tool. I've mentioned it many times, and I'm going to keep mentioning it just because it's almost everything we lacked in terms of discourse on Twitter. But not everyone believes that. I don't know if you saw this. The New York subway system, right, the MTA, has decided it's not going to use Twitter for its network updates anymore. Not that anyone used Twitter for subway network updates, but they're not going to do it. They say it's unreliable. Right now, I don't know if you can. Probably they would get fact checked because they tell a shit ton of lies in the New York subway. Oh, we had this much downtime and this much uptime and blah blah blah. It's never true. It's always a scam. That thing barely. It's not bad. It's not bad, but for example, if you're used to a subway system in a civilized place like Korea or Japan or most of them in Europe, um, Montreal has a tremendous one. It's awesome. But the one in New York, even when it's hot outside, they have to turn the air conditioners off. They have to run it at half speed because the electrical capacity of the city is down because of the I guess just air conditioners running and everything. So these things will run as like sweat boxes, the most disgusting things you've ever been in your whole life. Like, I mean, just gross, gross. I remember a friend of mine when we were on our way to Singapore, and he's from New York, and he's kind of American who hadn't traveled a ton, right? Hadn't been to many places. And he says to me, Nolan, my doctor said I have to get a shot if I go like to Singapore. Right? I got to get some kind of vaccine, right? Because it's in the tropics, dirty part of the world or something, right? That's what his doctor told me. I said, man, if you spend time in the New York subway system, you need the shot. You need it in New York, not it. Americans have sometimes a tough time understanding this. Sometimes they think that they're the center of civilization. When they go abroad, it's not that way. It's less organized, less advanced, and only folks who have never gone would fall for that kind of thing. But I had to explain to the guy that he's actually going to the civilized world. He's not the one coming from the civilized world and going to a place. He's going to the civilized world. The subway system in Singapore is the cleanest I've ever been in, cleaner than Japanese ones. So just gives you a sense of how these folks work. MTA is 24 hours. Yes, yeah, look, Sicilian I do like it. It is 24 hours. Well, they closed that down for a little while because people were living in it, right? I don't know if it's still there. And I did get around with it. It was fine. But we all know it has some troubles. And it's super political, right? It is super political and always has been, right? Now, why is a subway system getting involved in politics? I don't know. They got their own problems to solve. I don't know why they're getting involved in the Twitter fights. Imagine the MTA believing it understands the reliability of the Twitter network more than other people. It's ridiculous, right? And indeed, they could get fact checked. That's kind of why I'm saying maybe they're gone, right? But I don't know. And I got one more of these crazy stories, and it comes from Biden. And I want to use it as a contrast to talk about what we're going to talk about next. So Biden was giving an interview yesterday in, I guess, one of the gardens around the White House. He actually had children standing in as the security, as the Secret Service. So it was kind of cute, right? And he was sort of speaking without many guardrails, and he kind of now, this is a normal thing, I think, for people in positions of authority to say, right? So I'm gonna preface it by saying what he said, what I'm about to read about what he said when he was there, is normal for most CEOs, most people who are in the top executive position. They end up getting shielded from certain things. I've said many times in a company, for example, the CEO is often the person who knows the least about what's going on in the company, simply because things get hidden. Everyone has agendas. It's a very normal effect, right? So what I'm saying here is that what he said is a normal thing. But when it comes out of Joe Biden's mouth, it sounds very foolish, and he doesn't wear it very well. So here's what he said. He goes, "The one thing I thought when I got to be president is I'd get to give orders, but I take more orders than I ever did." So when you got dementia, don't mention to people that publicly, don't say publicly that people are telling you what to do. Right? Not a good look, right? People might suspect you're a little slower than you're letting on. So, but it does bring up, I think, a beautiful opening we have here, right? That this leader running again with his low energy, with his mental problems, with his diminishing intellectual capacity, with his inability to even understand context. I was talking to someone yesterday about the ice cream thing. He's also said before, "We've got so much ice cream." On sundowners, what sundowning is? It's the dementia folks who, at the end of the day, start getting cranky and start getting angry and all that stuff. Doctors actually prescribe ice cream for it because it relieves the anger, brings them back to a childhood state. So it's actually medically prescribed in that area. So when he goes on talking about it, it's kind of the same effect, right? So we got this guy licking ice cream, doesn't understand what it means, talking about how he takes orders, doesn't really get the context. So the field is kind of wide open, right? Unless there's going to be some um, democratic enforcement, right? That's what they call it, democratic fortification in the primaries. And we've already seen it, right? The Democrat primary already has moved the order of how they're going to run the thing. And it's opening the door, I think, to new folks. But there is malfeasance going on. There is some manipulation going on. And we see another example. It's not just the South Carolina and the New Hampshire thing. Here's another one. We had our man RFK Jr. yesterday, who was on ABC News and did an interview. It wasn't a live interview. So what they ended up doing was they edited out the parts in the interview when he was actually making his point. They removed context because they said it was dangerous. So here's what they say. ABC censors RFK Jr. during his primetime interview, citing false news about vaccines. And here's what ABC News comes out and says. During our conversation, Kennedy made false claims about the COVID-19 vaccine. We've used our editorial judgment and not included extended portions of the exchange in our interview. I predict a lot more of that to come. A lot more of that to come. And now it brings me to the point that primary seasons in US politics are actually some of the most dynamic and full of potential change of any of the American political processes. They're really neat, right? And I'm reminded of a book that was written in the 1990s called Primary Colors. And they ended up making a movie out of it starring John Travolta. What it was really about was the once in a generation talent that was Bill Clinton in the 1992 presidential election. So the context of the story, it's all written in. So first of all, the book was written by Anonymous. It was huge in the 90s. I remember it, seeing everyone's parents have this book and stuff like that. So, and I remember the movie being a big deal. So this thing, Primary Colors, was written by Anonymous for years, but the guy came out, he was like a Newsweek writer or something. And it was really just the story of this Southern campaign coming from a small Southern state that was totally chaotic and filled with all kinds of weird and energetic fellows and all kinds of salacious sex between campaign staff. Different, it's all about the main character, the John Travolta character, with the hairdresser, with this person, with that person, and the wife has to deal with it. And the wife is absolutely Hillary Clinton. And the movie was actually quite good. Not as good as the book, according to lots of people. I didn't read the book when it came out, but I did have a lot of friends who read it. It is kind of a classic. It sits in the history of American political literature as one of the top pieces. You have the one with that fake news writer we've mentioned a few times, the guy who got punched in the face by the comedian Russell Brand, if you remember, the writer of Game Changer, that's generally regarded as sort of another one of these mile markers in the history of American primary discussions. So there's a lot of novels written and a lot of books written about American primaries because they are so chaotic. lots of crazy things can happen, right? And I continue to believe that the more we see RFK Jr. Treated unfairly, the more attention he's going to get, right? I think it is effective that they're censoring him on these networks, because the whole point, again, that I've mentioned about RFK is a bit of the bomb inside the hand versus a firecracker inside the hand, and what happens, and a firecracker getting thrown at your body, the old Armageddon movie context, right? So get it from the inside and it happens, which is why I've been mentioning for a long time that having a Democrat like RFK Jr. is devastating to narrative control, because we are so polarized, and people don't really talk across those lines. Again, why community notes is so important, why I always bring up community notes, why I think it's important to reference context is always what's missing. Here, ABC News just strips the context, right? But here's what I'm thinking, and he had a pretty interesting day with RFK Jr. yesterday, but an amazing day for Vivek. I mean, amazing. He was here, he was there, he was smashing this thing down, calling for this to be taken down and that to be taken down. Here's what he said yesterday. So first of all, he does an interview with, and I'm sorry to say, I don't like to do this, but you got to mention the race of the people, right? It's unfortunate, but it's the context. I don't want to strip the context, and I wish race wasn't a context. I really do. I wish race wasn't a context, but you got to mention it. So here's what happened. He went on a podcast. I'm not sure who it was, but it was hosted by a guy from an Asian American guy, right? So he hosts the podcast. And here's what he says. So Vivek does an interview with him, and he's pushing. And he says, there's no greater way to fuel racism in our country than to take something away from someone on the basis of their skin color. That's exactly what affirmative action does. All ended. And I got to tell you, it's powerful to see an Indian American talking to an Asian American about racism and race-based stuff, because in the end, if you look at all these college admissions and all that kind of stuff, these guys are getting the shaft, right? They're getting the shaft. So for them to talk about this stuff in the open and say, like, look, we're getting discriminated by skin color, is an important change of context, an important advancement of the conversation. Now, again, I don't want to talk about race, right? We should be beyond that. It looked like we were getting beyond that at some point. We're getting dragged back into it. And, I had no problem, and I kind of don't have a problem with affirmative action until you have to ask about, if it's about redressing past problems, I'm kind of okay with it in a sense, right? But you also have to be able to ask the question, is when do you stop doing it, right? When do you stop saying that it might not work to rebalance, or we have to try other approaches, or how long should we give this as a form of rebalancing? You got to be able to talk about that stuff. You can't just say it's for infinity, right? You can't just say it's forever. You got to start having a process. Well, when do we end it, right? When do we say, well, at this point, we can't make those. We can't continue to layer this unfairness concept into something that's touching people so much. So that's just one thing he called to destroy, right? But that's not the end. He goes on. He goes on to Fox yesterday and talks about this, and he ends up getting a major bonus, right? So because of news that happened in the interim. So he says the best way to end the weaponization of the administrative state is to end the administrative state. Now, what have we been saying here on the show for a long time, right? It's about turning off the engine of the World War II machine that we never turned off. We had a World War II machine that won the war, and we just never turned it off. We kept all the parts running. We kept the aircraft carriers going. We kept everything running, right? We never thought about reducing. I mean, Washington, D.C. is mostly a function of dealing with the war. It grew for that time. We grew the administrative state. We grew the bureaucracy. We grew the size of the Washington engine in order to win World War II. And the net result is we never shut it off, and it continued to grow. It was built to do one thing, and then it tried to just manifest the future from that one thing it was built to do. And that's how we get some of these ridiculous outcomes that we have now. That's how we get all these runaway departments. That's how we get power getting sucked out of the representative people in Congress and put into the unelected bureaucrats across agencies across Washington, D.C. And we've been talking a lot about how one of the pendulum swings we would like to see, I think, as Bitcoiners and me personally, in the context of World War III, would be to really shrink Washington, D.C. as an outcome and have states, of course, assume more of their sovereignty. So, because remember, the shorter you make a state, the smaller you make a state and exercise sovereignty through these small states, the closer we are as individuals to absorbing that sovereignty and even flipping it further to a sovereign individual situation. So it's a big step along the way. And Vivek coming in here, so I'll read the full tweet. The best way to end the weaponization of the administrative state is to end the administrative state, starting with shutting down the Department of Education. So let's go back to talk about the Randy Weingarten and the lies in the community notes. Look at how effective that is now that Vivek is talking about destroying it. And we get the head of the union clearly lying and having community notes fact check them. And we've got Corey DeAngelis coming to Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, and he's been laughing about all these Randy Weingarten things, saying twice in a day she's been fact checked and is pinning the tweets to her thing. So you got to wonder about her overall IQ and capacity if she keeps pinning these fact check tweets to her thing. Maybe it's deliberate. Maybe she thinks it's her audience will just ignore Twitter fact checks because they're all being persuaded by folks like the New York subway system who continue to say that Twitter's got all these troubles. And, Twitter, like any other system, does have some troubles. So he says, I'll finish the quote, starting with shutting down the Department of Education. And then he goes on, and this is the good part. IRS and the FBI next, replaced with something from scratch. Now, the appetite for replacing the IRS is pretty ubiquitous across America, I would say, right? People hate that thing. And they're going to have another reason to hate it. So it turns out that they're going to hire armed agents from now on. And that's right. You heard it. When we used to talk about the gun to your head as an analogy for taxation and the coordination of the fiat system, that it is based on the control of violence, right? This is a theme that goes deep, deep, deep into Bitcoin. This is one of the original reasons why the cypherpunks were interested, of course, because the use of violence and force to enforce the fiat system has been something that was primordially objectionable to lots of people, right? Lots of people who understand that from the start. The Mises folks who understood that from the start understood quickly and have been promoting this idea that it is inhuman to live in a system like that, and it's fundamentally wrong, right? And we never imagined that it would become literal, where the IRS would actually have guns in order for them to enforce tax payment. But here we are. Here we are. They're going to hire armed agents in all 50 states. And Wall Street Silver had this to say. The duties of IRS special agents is to be willing and able to participate in arrests, execution of search warrants, and other dangerous assignments. Imagine giving the IRS these new special powers and arming the agents. Imagine having an IRS agent come to your door with a gun. How much more dystopian can America get at this point? How much worse does it get? This is pretty bad, right? And there's only one person out there talking about how stupid this is, and it's Vivek. Now, let's put the two of them together for a second, Vivek and RFK Jr., right? Here's something that I just came up with last night, and I think it's pretty interesting. First of all, I would love to see them debate. I would love it. It would be one of the most interesting political debates you'd ever seen. They'd have a lot of common ground, of course, but we might see something that we've never seen before, which is the following. RFK doesn't look like a liar. I mean, he got fact-checked by ABC, but he believes what he's saying, so it's not lying. He could be wrong, right? I don't know shit about vaccines and any of that stuff. I don't know what's going on with vaccines. The stuff he says makes sense to me. I would like to learn more about what he's saying. I would like for more people to look into what RFK is saying for sure. It fits my narrative bias, but I don't know, right? But I don't think he's a liar. I think he believes what he's saying. And that's enough for me to have more questions, right? But anyway, the interesting thing is not them debating with their political ideas. Vivek is also not a liar. And again, I don't think he's right about everything. He's probably got a lot of stupid ideas too. I see a lot of great ideas, but it's kind of normal to have good and bad. But the thing is, neither of them are liars. We've never seen that. We haven't seen two not liars debate politics in America in how long? I mean, honestly, probably Harry Truman and Eisenhower. But Eisenhower was a capable liar, not the kind of person who would do a bit for his politics, but he had to keep secrets and those kinds of things. So, but I guess they all do. So I'd say it would have been way back in, well, I guess Truman and Eisenhower never even ran against each other, but I feel like it's that era. I mean, really do. I feel like it's been that long at least. JFK wasn't a liar, but Nixon, who I love, he knew how to lie. Let's be, Watergate is fake news, 100%, right? I'm not denying that, but let's be honest, he was a very, very skilled, talented, intelligent politician, but an absolute liar, right? Trump, let's say the truth, right? The guy lies all the time. It's little lies. They're hyperbolic lies. They're not the kind of lies that are terrible like the ones Joe Biden says about all the racists in the country and how he's going to stop white supremacy because it's absolutely everywhere and is the biggest threat to America. That's a dangerous lie. That's a dangerous lie because it puts a target on the back of people who didn't deserve it, right? So exaggerating how many really awful people there are in America and saying it's so ubiquitous kind of paints a lot of people with an unfair brush, I would say, right? And as an absolute dangerous lie. So the last election was some, let me just change the chatter on there. Yeah, so disarm the population and arm the government. Well, that's what it looks like is happening, right? Imagine. So what would be amazing is just to watch a political debate between two non-liars. Like I said, we haven't seen that. Who knows what'll happen if two non-liars debate, right? But here's the other thought that I had. We'll see how Vivek does. The Republicans do have a fair system. I think he's going to get a lot of momentum and attention. I continue to think he's going to do great. Trump doesn't seem to want to target him because for whatever reason, he doesn't feel threatened or doesn't think it would be in his advantage to attack him right now. I don't know the reason why Trump isn't attacking him. He seems to be pretty encouraging. He calls him the young Vivek when he does refer to him, which I think is a Trump's way of saying he likes the energy, he likes what he's saying, but doesn't see him as a threat. But here's the thing that people aren't seeing. RFK Jr. is going to get mistreated, right? And there's not going to be cheating in the Republican primaries, I don't think, because of the way they're set up. They're not as manipulatable from the party point of view, from the centralized party point of view. But the Trump machine is powerful, right? And one can assume just because of his track record, he's going to get the nomination. But if RFK is so mistreated, and if RFK thinks he can mount a third party candidacy, one of the most beautiful and amazing things we could see is a cross-party ticket. Imagine if RFK and Vivek combine and actually run on the same ticket because they start doing some debates between them and we see that they're both not liars, they get along on most things. They can actually model Republican-Democrat reconciliation on all kinds of policy issues. And I think that would be really interesting. I think if that happened, you would finally have a real narrative that could be driven forward that's much more intimate to Americans and much more important to Americans about a third party candidacy. And let's just go back in time, right? The most effective third party candidacy in the history of American politics was done for one reason and was successful for one reason. It was because it fought against the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, if you don't know the history, the political history of what happened, it looks like this. Teddy Roosevelt was a trust buster, right? He was the trust busting president. And Yeah, Joe says, yeah, I agree. I agree with Joe. Yeah, the young Vivek means he's not qualified, but there is a bit of. I agree. It is a lightweight Trump attack. I agree with you, Joe. But it still leaves room for appreciation of his skills. I would say it's not damaging Vivek, right? It's a sales tactic, I guess you could say. It's not a punch in the face. It's moving past the sale as Trump often does. And you're definitely left thinking he's lightweight and not enough to be considered, right? And so, which is true, right? There's a lot we don't know about Vivek, by the way, right? You do have to think about that, because these people who come out of nowhere. Now, he's very talented. He's very talented. So talented people like him can come out of nowhere. 100% can come out of nowhere. And I have no reason to believe he isn't just a person who came out of nowhere. But all people who come out of nowhere, you got to pay attention. Now, I was contacted Vivek before he was running, when he was just talking about CBDCs, and already I was like, where did this guy come from to get on to Tucker Carlson and talk about CBDCs? I never heard of him before he talked about CBDCs, which was months before he ran for president. And I wasn't suspicious of where did this guy come from. I just was like, okay, I never heard of this guy. But as the story continues, you still kind of wonder, right? Now, no reason to be suspicious for him in particular. The suspicion is in general, right? Now, maybe I'm just ignorant. Maybe he just pivoted and it was a product market fit situation, and he's been um, advancing for those reasons. So I don't want to start any speculation. I see the speculation. There is speculation about this online. And I think it's a valid question, right? But I'm sure the answer is not sure, but I'm pretty sure the answer is that he's just a talented guy who found his moment and got energy and went forward, right? So good for him. And because he continues to want to tackle these subjects and these things that people won't talk about, right? It's great talking about getting rid of where's Trump on any of this stuff? Get rid of the IRS. I mean, he'll say it offhand, but he's not hammering the point like Vivek is right now, right? He's not hammering the point about destroying these agencies. Trump was on the best Trump we ever got was the primary Trump. Again, the whole point is these primaries do create situations that you can't really account for. I know everyone's so sure it's going to be Biden Trump again, right? And it very well could be. But primaries are radical events, and crazy stuff happens. So go back to what I was saying about Teddy Roosevelt. He was the big trust buster. Trusts were monopolies, basically. Standard Oil and all these things. So he was the trust buster. And that was, in fact, the origins of the job of president as we understand it today. He was the actual architect of what you think of as the president today. His nephew, Franklin, years later, sort of really modeled the job, but he took inspiration from his uncle, who was president between 1900 and 1908. 1901, he ascended to the presidency because of the assassination of the president. He was the vice president and jumped into the role because of the assassination. It was, I think, the youngest president in the history of the country at that time. So he ended up making this fatal flaw because he almost had a full first term, because the president, McKinley, was killed right away in Buffalo, New York. And it was like 3 years or something that he had in the first term. And he ended up counting that as a full term, Teddy Roosevelt did. And because of that, he couldn't run again in 1908. So he won an election in 1904. And when he was done in 1908, I think I'm correct about the years here, but I might be off by a year or whatever. So he ends up not being able to declare for a third time, but he puts his chosen successor, because he's so popular, he puts his chosen successor into the presidency, named William Howard Taft. And the one deal Teddy made with him was that you will trust bust any attempt at making a bank trust, right? So a monopoly of the bankers coming together to create an organization. He said, you will never allow that, because there was talk about it. We're still dealing with the populist movement of bimetallism. We're still dealing with the silver thing. We're still dealing with what Bitcoin graffiti talks about all the time, is the Wizard of Oz context for Bitcoin. And remember the Wizard of Oz book, written back then, some people say is about this time. It's about what's going on. years, about a decade before Teddy Roosevelt, but the thought and the inclination towards what became the Federal Reserve, which is better known as a bank trust, which is better known as a bank cartel, according to Teddy Roosevelt, was the one thing that when he picked his successor, William Howard Taft, he made him promise to never do. That was one of the most important things. So in those years where Taft becomes president, you get Teddy Roosevelt, who's off in the world. He goes out to Africa. Much of the stuff you see in the Smithsonian is stuff that he, and the Natural History Museum in New York City, that was all stuff that he, I guess the word is dispatched, but hunted in Africa and other places. There's a river in the Amazon called the Rio Roosevelt because he found it. He went down there and found a river in the Amazon. Disastrous trip. But he ends up coming back to America because rumors of the bank cartel, the bank trust getting set up are in the air. And William Howard Taft, his chosen successor, has betrayed him and is putting this thing in place. So Teddy Roosevelt comes back and creates the Bull Moose Party, the third party, his own party, because the Republicans don't want him anymore. But he's greeted as an absolute hero as he arrives back in New York City because he's going to destroy the banks. He's coming back to run again. He's going to be the president, and he's going to fix the banks and not allow them to create the Federal Reserve. And it went the best it's ever gone for a third party candidate in America, but he still came in second. And he split the vote, and that's what allowed the president who was around for World War I, who ended up being the Joe Biden of his time, who had some dementia issues and had some trouble. So this idea of a third-party candidacy tied to the bank trust, the bank cartel, the Federal Reserve, intimately tied to that one policy question, has been shown to be the most successful approach for a third-party candidate in the history of the United States. Ross Perot had a similar thing just about the economy. It wasn't exactly about the Federal Reserve. In his somewhat the second most successful third-party candidacy indeed was the one we're talking about for primary colors, which is the Bill Clinton campaign, because that was the Ross Perot campaign. And Ross Perot is the person who actually killed George Bush Sr. from being president, right? Because it split the vote the same way Teddy Roosevelt destroyed the Republican vote during the 1912 presidential election. So Roosevelt loses, but not by much. Still to this day, the Bull Moose Party, the most popular third party in the history of America. And look, it's a proven strategy to approach the Federal Reserve question with a third party candidacy and get pretty good support, right? Pretty good support. So can Vivek and a cross-party ticket with RFK achieve a similar result? I think so. I think both of those people are capable of packaging all of their issues, right? Vaccines, runaway bureaucracies, runaway agencies, right? You've got RFK, who's concerned about the runaway agencies and health, and he's got that sort of locked down. And then you get the Vivek story about the runaway agencies in IRS and FBI, which we've seen many times, and the Department of Education, which is getting fact checked all the time because they're liars. Right? So there's a real opportunity here because those issues can all be tied up in the problem with our money, with our inability to account for the money, with our inability to follow the money, with our inability to understand what's going on, right? It's just it's not the decisions that are made in each of these things that are the actual problem. It's not the policy objectives. It's not the policy choices of these folks. It's that the policy objectives and the policy choices are all being created without the stimulus of money that you can count. It's just out there, right? So the issue then becomes the potential of primary, let's call it just radical and how would I say it? just a dynamic within the election that allows for things we've never seen before to happen. Nature abhors a vacuum, and we have an opportunity now for that kind of stuff to happen. Just like we did when Teddy Roosevelt ran last time. People were unhappy with both candidates. They were unhappy that both the Democrats and the Republicans agreed on creating a bank trust. They didn't call it a bank trust. They called it the Federal Reserve because it sounded better, but it was a bank trust, right? It was a bank cartel, which is what we still live with today. We still live with the bank cartel today. And if you know the Jekyll Island story, they were very aware. That's why it was done in secret. They changed the branding. They understood how to manipulate and get this thing through, and they did. So here we are, right? So the Primary Colors book, I think, and then again you get Game Changer, right? These books that really get into the primary stories in the primary season in America show how it really is an opportunity for wild things to happen, right? And so the story going forward is they're going to be able to attack things and grab onto ideas that we've just never been able to chew on, you know. And the door is opening more and more. Here's one from the New York Times today, that I think is just incredible, right? To show how things are changing quickly, right? So the New York Times had a guest essay written today by Madison Hilly. Ms. Hilly is the founder of the Campaign for a Green Nuclear Deal. And the title of her essay is Why I Don't Worry About Nuclear Waste. And imagine, right? We're getting that kind of stuff in the New York Times, who have been shielded from and have been fear-mongered upon when it comes to nuclear energy for a long time, right? A long time. And here they are finally seeing the truth. The truth is nuclear waste has been solved for a long time. People don't like to talk about it. The transport can sometimes be an issue, but nuclear waste has been dealt with, right? And even the new ways that they're talking about doing it, digging, and that's the way they do it now, right? If you have a large capacity nuclear reactor, you don't transport the nuclear waste, they build the storage below. You can bury that stuff, right? You can build the storage there, and you could build hundreds of years worth of storage very easily, right? The fuel for these reactors is quite compact, right? It doesn't take up a ton of space. It's just rods, right? So all of that now is possible just because we're talking about it more. And a debate between Vivek and RFK Jr., like, you know, I'm talking about them running a cross-party candidacy as an extreme version of what could happen. Just them debating. And they might do so just because they're getting mistreated, right? They might do so just because they're getting mistreated. RFK is getting mistreated. Vivek will do it because it's good for business, right? And then what about this one? Did you see that? And this is the kind of thing I think you're going to see actually come up, right, in America. Did you see El Salvador has confirmed that Bitcoin City is still in the works? Now, it always sounded like a crazy idea. That thing, the line in Saudi Arabia, sounds crazy to some people. What Elon Musk is doing in Texas for his SpaceX to create a new city sounds a little less crazy. When Trump talked in his campaign about the Freedom Cities contest, which I still think he should be speaking way more about, that's the best thing I've heard from him in a long time. 10 new cities created in America from scratch, continues to be going in the direction of my prediction that one of the sleeper industries that we're not even seeing yet is these new cities from scratch. And El Salvador and Bitcoin City being at the top of it means to me that we are getting our citadels. We are going to build our new cities. And I can imagine that kind of conversation coming into the primary debate from folks like Vivek and RFK Jr. And it would be amazing to see that kind of stuff in both parties become a topic to discuss, right? So Bitcoin cities and Bitcoin citadels are going to be a main feature, I predict, a main feature of the 2024 presidential election, because it's going to be pumped up in the primaries. And I continue to believe that the favorable time coordination that we're seeing, the favorable looks like we're entering a bull market on schedule as everyone's predicted, is going to help us put Bitcoin at the tip of every tongue before we get to the 2024 elections. And that starts looking a lot like that 1912 election when you have the third party candidate that's capable because it's attached to a major question about money and what we're going to do going forward as a country with money. So that has the potential to combine with the new cities and all the new potential that can come from moving away from the old financial system to the new one. So we got good news on nuclear, we got good news on city building, and I think good news on people speaking from both political sides coming to some form of actual political debate simply because they're not liars. That's it, right? That's that simple. Just having two people who are not lying, they can disagree all day. You know what? One of the only things they let RFK Jr. say, and in the end, it's probably the most important thing he said, right? They censored him on vaccines in this ABC interview. They censored him on his impression of federal health agencies and how corrupted they were. They didn't let him say any of that stuff, right? What they did let him say was when they attacked his him for his family not siding with him. So they cited like four people in the family that were like his ideas on vaccines are dangerous and da, 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 right. And he responded to that. He goes, look, and this is why it's the most important. This is the kind of stuff that more Americans have to say, think, and push back on. And it might have been the most important thing he said in the interview. He said, um, all families fight. I have families that, some of my family came to my announcement. Even the family, I grew up in a big family. Of course, they're famously a large Irish Catholic family. And he says, we always fought, we always debated. We still do that today. And they're modeling the following behavior. He said, but we still love each other. We still know how to get along even though we disagree. We still know how to love each other even though we don't agree about any of this stuff. Now, he says, I will continue to love my family who don't support me in the election. I will continue to say kind things. And he said, I don't want to name names, but even the ones who disagree have sent me notes of encouragement and about what I'm going through as a candidate for presidency, and still saying they disagree with me, but, I support your personal growth and personal challenge that you've put before you, your quest, if you will, right? So the point is, we're going to get interesting things. And if you thought Primary Colors was a good book about the primaries, if you thought Game Changer was an important book about the primaries, I predict whatever book is written about this primary is going to be the most consequential primary book in the history of American primaries. Oh, the other one, Fear and Loathing in American Politics was also, like, what was the fellow again? Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. He was the famous gonzo journalist. Blah, blah. I don't know why I'm saying Aldous Huxley. My name is absolutely not him. It's the drugs that are confusing me. The drugs they both took a lot are confusing me. But anyway, that famous journalist that Johnny Depp played in a movie that was amazing. Hunter S. Thompson. Thank you. Hunter S. Thompson. Another great primary book, right? He was on the primary trail in 1972 when Richard Nixon had the most successful election in the history of the United States. And he was there on the campaign trail for that. So these books about primaries and elections are, Americans love them. And Americans loved Primary Colors because it was salacious and it had all these scandalous things in them. But that was the time, right? That was the Clinton administration. That was the 1990s in America. I think what we're seeing here is going to be more similar to the 1912 affair and when things were very interesting around the primaries and the election. All right, team. I got a busy day. I got to interview some people today. I got to interview Bow-Tied Bull, which should be fun. I'll be interviewing the Foundry guys too, the big Bitcoin miners. Still here in Texas. I'll be going back to Canada tomorrow. But my flight is, I don't think, so late that I can't do this. We'll see. It might be a short one. I think my flight's at like 11 out of here in Texas. So I think I should be fine to meet with y'all in the morning. And once I'm back in Toronto, we shouldn't have any trouble. I'll soon be in Montreal, and maybe I'll go to some. Maybe we'll have a bit of a physical Montreal hangout sometime. Um, but I'll be traveling back to the farm at some point. I got some work to do. I'll be building a house myself there this summer, by the way. It should be fun. I'll share some of that with you guys. Just a little guest house. Not totally myself, obviously, but I worked in those jobs a lot. I know how to handle some tools. Right? I can't run it. I can only. The Fed is neither a reserve nor. You got that right. Yeah, you got that right. George. Thanks, George, for helping me catch up. I cannot verify Sunrise, so I'm at a loss here. Not seeing all posts. Yeah, sometimes Ranmore they get picked out. The YouTube, I guess, does it slower. They don't make it to me here, and they don't make it to me all the time here in the streaming service that I use. Yeah. Have a great day, everyone. Yeah, where do I set? Bonne journée à tous. Yeah, meet up be cool. We can do that, P-Man Van. I like to meet with people, have a good time. I'll be right downtown. Oh, great Bitcoin. It is a great read. Yeah, he's not a great writer, but he's an exciting writer. Like, I get engaged with his books. I really do. Um, I really do. I'm glad you're liking it. The Lost was a book. I mean, honestly, they couldn't. Steven Spielberg just couldn't make the book that he wrote in the end. Steven Spielberg made his own story. It was not the same as what was written. All right, indeed. Great day, all. Have a good one. Peace.